Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today to have an opportunity to say a few words and give a little insight just on one perspective, I suppose, because as many of you know me, I could, as they say, talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater for a couple of hours. I'll do my best to restrict myself to the 15 odd minutes here today and just give you a little insight of a sliver of the issues that sort of press the buttons of the road transport industry, or road freight industry as you'll commonly hear me refer to it. We have huge respect for the talent, the ability and the research focus of all the people in the room and all the people that you work with, and you're not going to get any comments from me today about the very important work that's done on a lot of the detail. What I wanted to talk a little bit about today is the opportunity in management speak. When you're running a business, sometimes you have to really take stock, take some serious time out and look up and out and not just down and in. Legislation is an area that I've had a fair bit of experience with, so I'll give you some insights today about the legislation that we work with and the sorts of things we would like you to think about when you're starting to form plans about what area of research you might be looking at, how you might consider it contributes to the industry. And I would also ask that you give consideration to what it might change in the outlook and posture for the industry over the next decade or two. Because I would argue the way we develop our legislation tends to be that we stop and look back and try and correct. We don't stop and look forward and anticipate what it should look like so that we can grow into the next couple of decades rather than forever looking back to correct. It's a little bit like putting some boot polish on an old pair of boots and thinking that you're actually making progress when the reality is it's time to actually change footwear and look at a different path. A couple of things I'd like you to reflect on, and I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room here might know more about it than I do, but very informed observers around the world are telling us that by 2027, which isn't that far away, the productivity value of AI will be the primary economic indicator of national power. So when you look at the actual power and influence of a country around the world, by 2027, its capability in AI will be the primary indicator of that horsepower. From our industry perspective, we talk about productivity and efficiency all the time. One of the things we find that in the broader community is they never understand scale in our industry. They see a couple of B doubles, they see a couple of combinations or whatever, and they think, oh yeah, that sort of fills the supermarkets in our suburbs. Just as an example here in Queensland, the road between Toowoomba and Brisbane carries 6,000 truck trips a day. That's just one short corridor that feeds Brisbane on a daily basis. So when we talk about efficiency and productivity, if you take 5% off each of those truck trips, you're adding truck trips every day. So you might move from 6,000, you make a decision to say, okay, we're going to limit those combinations by 2 tonne because we've got some issue with the pavement. You're in one step taking a decision to make 6,000 truck trips, perhaps 6,400 a day. So that has follow-on implications for road wear, fuel burn, the exposure of cars to trucks, the list goes on. So what we try to do is just get people to understand impact, not just the detail. And that's a key difference. ESG. As ESG unfolds in this country, as it is around the world, environmental, social and governance, we're getting indicators from the economic whiz kids that are telling us that in the next 5 years, ESG will make up 1/5 of your business costs. So as you're developing tech, software, new innovations and the like, and perhaps are focusing on some particular element of road freight, bear in mind we want to be able to tap into that information to be able to feed the data sets that are going to be necessary for us to comply with ESG. And it'll lead to some comments I'll make about who owns that, whose IP is that, who owns that data. We make a whole variety of assumptions in our legislation that authorities do. And I would make the argument that you do not. That IP is one of the most valuable assets of a road freight business. The smart logistics of a road freight company is fundamentally the primary component of its IP. And yet we have a legislative system that allows authorities to download that anytime they want, without warrant, and in many cases, I would argue, are going on a fishing expedition. It comes about from the evolution of the way our legislation has grown over the last 100 years. And if you think back, you know, there's a fellow who's had a bit of an impact on the world by the name of Albert Einstein. He had a little bit to say about repeatability. Well, we need to reflect back on the 100 years of growth of road freight. We went into the First World War on horseback and came out on trucks. That's approximately 100 years ago. That's the origins of where our legislation has come from. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. So the three key elements of ESG are those markers in the sand of those commencement times are over the next couple of years here in Australia. They are going to have enormous impact on the reporting data and requirements for our organisations, particularly in what's called Scope 3. So whether you're a small business of 10 or 20 outfits through to hundreds and or thousands, where you fit in the food chain is where you're going to be required to report on that data. So a lot of companies will fit in Scope 3, so that'll be whether you fit upstream or downstream from major clients. What you will have to do is undertake an enormous level of reporting off systems that you people are currently developing for a different purpose. So there's another primary purpose that information is going to be utilised for, so that our people can undertake the reporting that they're going to need to do. And we'd like the research fraternity to consider that as you're developing these products, because it's not single purpose. It's going to be at least dual purpose, might even have three primary purposes. So as we move into a low carbon world, there's all sorts of considerations, whether it's electric, hydrogen, and no doubt one of you clever people is going to come up with a little jar of green juice or something, and that'll run a truck for 100 k's or 200 k's or whatever the case may be. I don't say it lightly. I mean, we very much look at this as currently we are looking at electric and hydrogen. Undoubtedly, there are going to be other sources be developed over the next little while. I sometimes use the analogy of when we moved to mobile phones. We first undertook mobile phone calls around about 1987. In the early 90s, we were walking around with a great big brick, making a couple of calls, and we were very excited we could make those phone calls. We knew the tech was sustainable, but we also knew it had a long way to run. In 2004, Nokia was still the answer, until Mr. Apple came up with the iPhone and moved to the whole mobile device concept. We see the evolution of low carbon somewhat similar conceptually to that journey. It's going to take some decades. We don't yet know where that tech is going to take us. We need to be very careful about the assumptions we make on infrastructure investment today that may or may not be relevant or salient in a decade's time. We're not saying it's wrong, we're just saying you need to take measured steps as we develop that infrastructure. We currently don't have in this country